This testimony is unbelievable. Listen to how this man was allegedly persecuted by the FBI and courts, seemingly simply because of his political and religious beliefs.
On May 2nd, 2022, a draft copy of the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs was leaked to the press and gave rise to widespread attacks on nearly 100 pro-life facilities and 300 Catholic churches, which were vandalized, damaged, and even firebombed. Only in the aftermath of the leak did the DOJ begin to more aggressively pursue FACE charges, yet these prosecutions did not address these significant increases in violence, but rather the largely peaceful pro-life demonstrations at abortion clinics. Take, for example, one of our witnesses here today, Paul Vaughn, who was prosecuted for praying outside of an abortion clinic. Vaughn was arrested when an FBI SWAT team raided his home at gunpoint early in the morning in front of his wife and 11 children, later sentencing him to 6 months of home confinement and 3 years of probation. Another FACE Act defendant, Lauren Handy, was sentenced to 57 months in prison for her role in protesting late-term abortion within our nation's capital. And again, in the case of Eva Idle, an 89-year-old, I repeat, 89-year-old death camp survivor who is awaiting federal sentencing for her peaceful advocacy for praying for the unborn at abortion clinics, where prison time could be a potential death sentence given her age. And she is a survivor of concentration camps and abuse in Europe. But it doesn't stop with the FACE Act either. This law is just one tool that the Biden-Harris DOJ has issued in its years-long crusade against political dissenters. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division has chosen to undermine election integrity laws, suing states like Virginia for taking steps to ensure election integrity. The DOJ targeted Ethan Heim after he revealed that his employer, the Texas Children's Hospital, was performing illegal transgender medical interventions on minors. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division opened pattern or practice investigation into local police departments in search of patterns of misconduct during the height of the defund the police movement.
I think the chairman, only two. And what we forgot, what the ranking member didn't mention, is in the aftermath of the Dobbs leak and the Dobbs decision that spring and summer, 103 churches and crisis pregnancy centers were attacked. She used the term extremist for the pro-life people. Look, we're against all violence. I agree with that statement. But that was not in any way an accurate picture of what took place in that summer and, frankly, the disparity in who's prosecuted under the FACE Act. Here's the bottom line. Government has been weaponized against we the people. September 23rd, 2022, Mark Houck at home in Pennsylvania. 10 unmarked cars pull up to his house at 6:30 a.m. and arrest him in front of his wife and 7 kids. What'd they arrest him for? Praying in front of an abortion clinic and protecting his son from some crazy person screaming swear words in his child's face. In fact, he was prosecuted, went to court, and the jury of his peers found him not guilty. 12 days after he's arrested, our witness, Mr. Vaughn, at home in Pennsylvania and arrested in front of his wife and 11 children. And what was he doing? Exactly what the chairman said, praying and singing hymns outside of an abortion clinic. Just came and got him. March 5th, 2024, in Mr. Big State, Penny McCarthy, 66-year-old grandmother, in her driveway, U.S. Marshals pull up, guns drawn, and arrest her. They said she violated parole, a parole violation for a nonviolent offense from 25 years earlier. And they show up with guns drawn and arrest this lady. She said, I think you got the wrong person. And guess what? She was right. They had the wrong person. And of course, we had a hearing on this right here in this room. Brian Malinowski, top official, highest paid official in the municipal government in Little Rock, Arkansas. Gun hobbyist, sold 6 guns, and the ATF said, you're a felon because you sold 6 guns without a license. And they show up, again, 10 cars, show up at 6:01 a.m., First thing you see, because we got the video, the first thing they do is walk up and put tape on the doorbell cam. 53 seconds after they put tape on the doorbell cam, Brian Malinowski is shot and later dies. And they weren't even, this wasn't even an arrest warrant, this was a search warrant. They've been surveilling this guy for 2 weeks. They were going to go the week before, but found out he wasn't home, so they waited for him to be home. You can't make any sense of what they did. Government has certainly been weaponized against we the people. And of course, last week, what did we find out last week? 2 Inspector General reports came out last week. The first one said, when Chris Wray first started at the FBI, they spied on Capitol Hill staffers. And here's the amazing thing. One of the guys they spied on is the guy who's going to replace Chris Wray. They spied on Kash Patel. Got the email, who you're emailing to, emails coming into you, phone calls. Did that to, and it was Democrats too. Democrats should be just as outraged. They were spying on Republican and Democrat staffers. And of course, the second report that came out last week from the Inspector General, we find out that there were 26 confidential human sources here in the Capitol, at the Capitol. Well, some of them came in the Capitol. 26 of them on January 6th. 17 went in the restricted area, 4 went in the Capitol, 0 were arrested. And remember, confidential human source is a fancy name for spy. Spying on Americans that day. And we also know they spied on parents, right? Spied on moms and dad going to school board meetings. We know that. They set up a snitch line. You could report on parents. One of the FBI whistleblowers that came and testified in front of this committee, this Congress, told us he was sent to go get license plates from parents in the parking lot when they're at a school board meeting. Our government doing that. And of course, all this makes me wonder, are they spying? Might they be spying on pro-life activists? Other Americans who are concerned about the sanctity of human life, might they be doing that? Well, guess what? They tried that too. They tried that too, because we got the memorandum from the Richmond field office earlier this Congress. Page 4 of this memo says we now have new opportunities to mitigate violent extremism threat through outreach to traditional Catholic parishes and the development of sources with the placement and access to report on places of worship. Now that's fancy FBI speak for we're going to put spies in the parish, spies in the church, in America.
Chairman Roy, Ranking Member Scanlon, and honorable members of this committee, thank you for entertaining this important discussion today and allowing me to share our story with you. I'd like to speak to you about the DOJ's Project 2022 that happened October 5th at 7 a.m. in the morning when my house was assaulted, my wife and children were terrorized, and I was kidnapped at gunpoint by 4 armed men. I had just sent 3 of my children to the car so I could take them to school when the house began to shake from a loud banging near the front door. I heard men shouting on my porch, "Open up, FBI." The banging continued. As I looked out a side window to check the location of my children, I saw 2 unmarked SUVs with lights flashing, but I did not see my children. The banging continued, and I heard more shouting. I opened the curtains on the front door to find 3 men with guns trained on the door. I asked who they were looking for, and they replied, "We're here for you." They did not identify me or provide identification for themselves. As I believed there was an imminent threat to the safety of my wife and 7 children who were home that day, I determined to surrender myself to them, hoping that they were legitimate law enforcement. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, staring down the barrels of both a pistol and an automatic weapon pointed at my head. As I did, I asked what authority they were operating under and if they had any identification. I later learned at the same time 3 of my children, ages 12, 14, and 18, were being detained in the side yard on the edge of the woods by a 4th armed man. I was taken without the presentation of a warrant or identification when requested. Make no mistake, this was an armed conflict and I was unarmed. Lethal force was abused and to abridge my God-given and constitutionally secured rights. At the moment of being placed in handcuffs, I became a slave to ideological tyrants, either the ones holding the weapons or the ones they obeyed. The event that brought this ill-fated drama to my front door took place 18 months prior, as has been noted. Pro-life Christians gathered at care from abortion clinics in Mount Juliet to attempt to save unborn children that were scheduled to die that morning. Of the couple hundred people who attended that day, 8 adults were in fact arrested for nonviolently sitting at abortion clinic doors. For doing a sit-in like many of you have seen right here in your own buildings, Antifa and BLM and Hamas. I wonder how many of those have faced 10 years of prison for those activities. But the fact remains that I did not do any of these things. I did nothing that was outside constitutionally protected free speech and religious freedom. I did nothing that day that I've not done many times since FACE was passed in 1994. I did not sit in, I broke no laws, federal or local, and I was not arrested the day of the event. But yes, Member Scanlon, I did pray that day. I had talked with the police chief and lead negotiating team. I helped the police and the pro-lifers by messaging back and forth. The police spokesperson complimented us on the peacefulness nature of the event on the evening news. The lead negotiator testified for us in our federal trial. There's a lot of talk about violence around the issue of abortion. Of course, all people of honor and character denounce acts of violence on either side of this issue. But the narrative has been projected against the pro-life people and fails to take into account at least three other aspects of violence around this issue. There is violence committed against every unborn child in every abortion. There's violence committed by aggravated fathers or other family members of aborted children. And there's violence being done to pro-lifers by our own government. Any serious conversation about violence going forward needs to include these three facts. The FACE Act was ostensibly passed because of violence, but as my family knows very well, all it did was give violence the cover of law and place it in the hands of the government. The phrase, "the process is the punishment," and the weaponization of the FACE Act are not just words in our household. We are living the reality of those words. Since my arrest, I've been restricted to the Middle District of Tennessee for over 2 years under control and supervision of the federal government. My family spent 20 months of having a potential decade in prison hanging over their lead provider's head, my head. We endured long, stressful days of the actual trial, enduring lies and half-truths for the sake of government winning a case with no regards to actually seeking justice. The process is entailed government agents invading and inspecting our home, calling my home to make sure I'm obeying the rules. It involved giving up my rights as a U.S. citizen in spite of the novel use of the 1800 conspiracies laws. The appeal court refused to stay the order pending the appeal to find out if this was a legal right or application of the law. All this process is a punishment, and I was the one that did not get jail time. There are those who are in jail today while we are discussing this abuse, some of them for over a year at this point. With the overturning of Roe and the long train of abuses, the unequal application of the FACE Act, there is no legitimate reason for it to remain on the books. It is a tool whose sole purpose is to stifle free speech and abuse the rights of Christian conservatives. There is nothing that the FACE Act does that is not already accomplished by state laws across the land. If abortion is returned to the states, so should the laws governing it.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Ms. Hawley, may I give your testimony?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Roy, Ranking Member Scanlon, and members of the committee. One of the most enduring and crucial features of
abortion care. I thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady from Vermont. I'm going to use the time for myself now. Mr. Crampton, you just had some questions directed to you. I want to give you a chance to respond very quickly because I want to move on to the rest of the questions. I would note also that only 42 of my Democratic colleagues saw to it to join with us to sanction the International Criminal Court, which is trying to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu is somehow a war criminal for defending his country against the vicious attacks from Iran, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, and all of those that are trying to target the Jewish state. Do you have anything quickly to respond to the attacks?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. I would point the gentlelady to the facts as testified to by Mr. Vaughn. Here comes people, guns drawn, banging on his door as he described it, and it's not an unfair characterization. He was kidnapped at gunpoint before his wife and children. No authority given, even when he asked directly. They just point to a little sticker on the vest saying that's all the authority you're going to get that says FBI.
I'm a local businessman. I've been there for 17 years in the community. A phone call, I would have happily talked to him. And I would like to ask for my 13 and my 12-year-old and my 18-year-old daughter that was out in the side yard, what recourse do they have at law for the abuse that they handled at this guy holding them at bay right there? And also by the same department of the FBI in Tennessee that 2 months later shot a guy in his own living room.
Can you shed light on the extent to which the truth is, notwithstanding what Professor Waters said a minute ago, that what we're dealing with here is the conflation of the existing statutes and the things that go back to the Ku Klux Klan Act, and that we now have a situation under the federal civil rights conspiracy that they're blending these together to target people intentionally, that they're using this and targeting it intentionally so that they can go after people with punishable by up to 10 years in prison.